Welcome to Anarchitecture, Episode 21, Agenda 21. A quick audio note. I've got a new recording set up, and when we recorded the intro to this episode, it turns out that my main mic wasn't recording, and the audio that got picked up was on the built-in mic in my PC, which is halfway across the room from me. So my audio quality is not so great. But that's only for the intro portion, so once the main episode starts, the audio is much better. And the nice thing is that our official policy up till now has been that any and all audio problems are the listener's fault, because really you're just not listening hard enough. However, as you'll hear in this episode, we now have a new scapegoat for audio problems, and really any other problems with the podcast. And this is none other than Dark Tom Woods. Who or what is Dark Tom Woods? Tune in to find out.
This episode is a little different than some of the other ones you've probably heard from us. We were invited onto the Friends Against Government podcast, which is a comedy podcast by Car Campit and Birdarchist, who are libertarians and caps.
I think Car might be like an agorist or something. I don't know. I can't keep track of all the different intersectional identities in libertarian politics these days.
So they've had their podcast for about a year. Car was actually one of our first followers on Twitter. He used to post our stuff way back when we first got started, so he's OG with the anarchy.
He's the one. He made us. He made us what we are.
That's right. We got the Car Campit bump. I actually discovered them a little while ago when I started listening to the Rollo and Flappy show, and I noticed that they had Car Campit on as a guest. I kind of recognized his Twitter handle. So I know that guy. He's one of our guys. So I found out from that they had started this other podcast, and so I've been listening to it pretty much almost since they started. And it's one of my must-listen podcasts every week because they're just hilarious. And you'll see in this episode that the way these guys get each other going, it's just a riot.
Yeah, it's definitely a guilty pleasure.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, they're serious thinkers. You know, these guys are not dumb.
Yeah, they know this stuff. But
they're very good at kind of playing dumb and just acting like idiots and having a good time with it. So I think they like to emphasize that it's not a libertarian podcast per se, but it's a comedy podcast, by a couple of libertarians. And so, they do end up talking quite a bit about stuff that other libertarians talk about, but, they've got some pretty funny takes on everything. There's some ongoing kind of inside jokes that you might pick up on in here. One is that they have an affinity for cryptids, which are, like Bigfoot and I don't know, the road toad and all these sort of well-known what do they call it? Cryptoanimalia. Cryptozoology. That's it. Is that Yeah. Yeah, and in this episode, and actually I think the episode just before it, they created a new cryptid, which is known as Dark Tom Woods, which you'll hear the explanation for that in the episode.
Of course, Tom Woods is a popular libertarian podcaster. He had us on his episode number 802, which you can hear on our feed as episode number 8. Yeah,
and we actually talk a little bit in the episode about how that all came about, and then of course that devolves into pure chaos. There's another running joke in the show. So Carr is actually a civil engineer. And when they've had discussions with Rollo from the Rollo and Slappy show, Rollo's a mechanical engineer. And there's been this sort of running joke that a civil engineer isn't a real engineer. And so you'll hear a few takes on that as well in this thing. So, of course, I pile on that one as well as a mechanical engineer myself. So these guys have a sort of episode format that they've done in the past called the Conspiracy Court, where someone comes on to basically promote or defend a conspiracy. They've done some on adrenochrome, which if you don't know what that is, you gotta listen to that episode. They've done some on various cryptids like Bigfoot and whatever else and road toad. They've done some on gang stalking. Did you hear that one?
No, I didn't.
That's some other weird thing. And, of course, and some other various, CIA conspiracies and whatever. So when they invited us on, I had the idea to do they haven't done anything about like Agenda 21. So when they invited us on, I had the idea to do an Agenda 21 conspiracy court, because that kind of really is right up our alley in terms of the things we talk about. And it's also, of course, a juicy conspiracy for them to sink their teeth into. So in this episode, bear in mind that we are kind of pushing this case for the Agenda 21 conspiracy, more so than a sober kind of assessment of what Agenda 21 actually is and what it's all about. We're planning to release a separate episode on our own feed where it's just the two of us taking a bit of a closer look at Agenda 21 and going over some of these themes with a bit more of a sober approach to it. So in the course of these discussions, I listened to one of the recent episodes where they had announced that they were looking for a new theme song. And of course, since Tim and I do all our own music for the podcast, in fact, it's mostly me that does all the music for the podcast, I figured that I might be able to help the guys out. And so what happened was the next morning I woke up at 4 a.m. and had a sort of a flash of inspiration that they needed to have basically like a spoof on kind of 80s sitcom theme songs. And within, a half hour laying in bed, I think I had a couple of verses already worked out and the chorus popped into my head, which is based on sort of a mashup of maybe the theme from Cheers and the theme from Full House. And I
don't even know what the theme from Full House is. Oh, yeah, right. Bow.
Yeah. Everywhere you look, there's a place you need to hold on to.
Well, you really listened to this, didn't you?
I did some research.
Yeah. I wish you put that much effort into our podcast. We'd actually get an episode out now and then.
That's not the problem. Yeah. And speaking of that, so as we say in the podcast, it actually took us about a month to sort out all the logistics for this thing. Which, if you're a regular listener, you understand that that's sort of our normal mode of operation here. Is that it takes us so long just to get on the phone to each other to record one of these things. And one more thing on the theme song. So of course you'll probably recognize my voice on there, but you'll also hear I managed to get the real fake Michael McDonald to sing on a couple parts of it. Because Michael McDonald is the guy who sang on the Doobie Brothers, you don't know me, but I'm your brother. he's
spot on.
And of course he became sort of an icon of the soft rock world of the 80s.
The Yacht Rock world of the 80s.
The Yacht Rock world.
Dude, he used to play with Steely Dan.
Yeah, he was a backup. And actually, if you listen to, I think, like Hey 19, I think you can pick out his voice on the backup vocals of that song.
How could you miss his voice?
Yeah, so he's really what made Steely Dan. There'd be nothing without him. Nothing.
Yeah. They wouldn't be played on a single yacht without him.
Yeah, and likewise, I'd say that the Friends Against Government podcast was really nothing until they got the fake Michael McDonald to sing on their theme song. So I expect to see these guys go in a lot of places, really on the back of the fake Michael McDonald on their theme song.
Just like Nate Dogg and Warren G did.
That's really what put them on the map. What the hell song did they use?
What?
What song did they use?
I keep forgetting. That's a Michael McDonald track.
I don't even know. I have to think of
Regulate? Nate Dogg, Warren
G. Is that
Regulate?
Oh, is that a Michael McDonald song?
Yeah, it's a Michael McDonald group.
Wow, that's awesome.
It's the Godfather of rap.
Now, please bear in mind that the Friends Against Government podcast is not suitable for work or really for any self-respecting human being.
This one's probably going to be more for the construction workers in the audience rather than the office workers, right? This one's for the blue hats, not the white hats.
These guys are pretty much no holds barred with stuff they'll get into it. And actually, this episode is probably one of their cleaner ones.
Yeah, it was fairly tame, I think. A few dirty words here or there, but I think we got off pretty clean.
A few F-bombs, yeah. And one thing I want to also say here is, if you don't understand facetious humor, then this might not be the episode for you. For example, we don't actually think that the KKK is cool, just in case that went over anyone's head. And likewise, the acronym for Friends Against Government is FAG. So they call themselves the Fagcast, and they call each other fags. Now, this isn't a homophobic thing. Again, it's facetious, and if you don't know what that means, look it up. And just try to enjoy the podcast. And so it is my great honor to give you the Friends Against Government podcast, episode 61, Agenda 69.
Sometimes you might feel trapped between the right and the left. No one listens when you say taxation is theft. But there's a place where people know harsh government brings tears. So grab some glue and Latrina be best friends.
Speaking of which, when is y'all's next episode coming out? It's been months.
Yeah, that's a perennial question for us.
Yeah. Well, you guys put so much effort into it. Like everything is so heavy. Like it sounds great. It's just it's like really edited and really it sounds like a lot of work goes into it.
We're on like the Dan Carlin release schedule.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what though? That's kind of a cool space to occupy. I wish that we could afford to do that. Like to just kind of be like, oh shit, Fag's dropping an episode.
Yeah, we've got to stay regular.
Yeah, I like, but I love the idea of just being like, here, motherfuckers, it's a Tuesday.
Yeah, I wish we could say that was like the way we planned it and wanted to do it. It's really just, I mean, you see how long it takes us to coordinate a bloody phone call.
Yeah.
Part of that's
usually takes about 4 phone calls to actually get an episode down. So.
Yeah.
Well, one of you's down in Australia. One of you's in New England. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm in Maine.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's got to make it a nightmare. Is that basically like 12 hours difference?
Yeah, you could basically like from where Joe live and where I live, you could basically hold a globe between your fingers and just spin it.
Oh,
man.
dude, you guys,
Earth's not a globe, but we'll get to that.
You guys could make an Earth sandwich.
This is true.
Yeah. So, thanks so much for. I mean, this was it is a coordination nightmare, especially just with time zones and all and everything like that. And we had to reschedule on you guys last time. So thanks for being flexible and coming on.
Can we blame?
I'm excited to get some architects and whatnot on here to talk about something other than what Bird wants to talk about.
Can we get like can we blame Dark Tom Woods for the problems of this episode as well? Or
we've created a mythical creature, like a magical creature, and it's Dark Tom Woods, and he's the gremlin of all gremlins amongst the libertarian community. And he will receive our ire for ruining our episode with Mark Claire.
Yeah, he deleted our episode with Mark Claire. He made it very difficult for us to call one another. In fact, I think I would even blame Tom Woods for you being in Australia in the first place.
Probably. That's probably
the
where the
reason
blame
I'm
lies.
here.
I'll go all the way back.
He went there looking for freedom.
Yeah, I listened to one of his marketing seminars, and it inspired me to move to Australia.
Did it really?
No, my wife's from here originally.
Man, I bit hard on that. That hook was like lodged.
I'm looking at it. I'm like, wait a minute, Dark Tom Woods isn't real. Why would he have?
No, he said Tom Woods. Did you say Dark Tom Woods?
Well, it could have been Dark Tom at the time.
Man, I probably would have bit either way. It doesn't matter.
I got a bridge to sell you. Speaking of bridges,
yeah. Let's talk about the bridges.
Guys, I gotta tell you, I don't know anything about architecture, civil engineering, or other real forms of engineering. So you guys gotta walk me through this one, the whole thing, the whole deal.
Are both of you guys still practicing architects?
I am a practicing architect. Joe is not. Joe is an engineer.
That's right. Now I remember you guys going over that early. Like you were an acoustical engineer or something?
No, Joe. Tell him what kind of real engineer you are.
All right. So here's my progression. So I studied mechanical engineering.
Okay.
Bachelor's in that. I spent 8 years installing audio video systems in planetarium theaters.
Okay, I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, and my claim to fame is that I installed a system on the Queen Mary 2 cruise ship, which is
on the Niagara Falls.
No, that was the Queen Mary 2 is at the time it was built. It was like the biggest one in the world.
Oh,
whoa.
That'd be funny if it was at Niagara Falls and it was so big it just took up the whole thing. And walked
just
down to it and
there.
Walked up to the falls. Like, wow, I'm on a boat, but it's just perfectly circular and can rotate in the pool there.
Yeah, that's all it does. And then for the last almost 10 years, I've been working selling power stations down in Australia.
Selling power stations to whom?
Yeah, so to pretty much whoever wants. Mostly like miners, like remote miners, and but we also do like biogas, landfill gas sort of stuff, and like cogeneration into buildings and that sort of stuff.
Oh my God.
So now I'm the pinnacle of all engineering, which is the sales engineer.
Yes, that is.
What is that? Hold on.
Peak.
What's a sales engineer?
It's basically someone with an engineering degree who got into sales.
Yeah.
Oh, so like a businessman, like I don't. So it's just a business degree then. It becomes a
It's
business.
like the
It's-
salesperson
it's
who
the-
actually knows what they're talking about.
Yeah, it's the engineer who finally realizes that the reasonable way out of this madness is by just
Right.
selling stuff.
It's like you get a teacher and you want them to have a major in the thing they're teaching, not a major in education.
Yeah.
I'd rather have an expert than a person who knows what the expert should be saying.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right,
yeah.
cool. So,
I'm like the guy behind the guy, you know.
all right, cool.
Poke your head out every now and then, like,
Yeah.
Jeez. And so, Car, what do
got the
you do
numbers, guy.
exactly?
what?
What do you do exactly, Car?
Oh,
I
these
still
days,
don't
not
know
much. I'm
to
just
this
poking
day.
around.
I don't know what
Having
a
a good
civil
time.
engineer does still to this day. Seriously.
No, I always did land development. That was
Okay.
my thing.
Okay.
So
Could I put the three of you together to build and sell a house?
you could probably put the two of them together. You don't even really need me, honestly.
Well, why? But you had a tenant at one point.
I'd probably just work against them.
You didn't you have a tenant at one point, Car?
I did. Those days are long gone. 4 days ago.
Apparently they're long gone, but you got some stuff out of it. All right, that's cool.
Well, if it makes you feel better, Carr, on most of my projects, I end up recommending that they get a civil engineer involved, or at least a surveyor.
Okay.
Usually need,
Okay.
even on residential stuff, we usually need a surveyor.
Good.
Sometimes that
Being a
turns
surveyor.
into
Being a
being some kind of
surveyor
a site
sounds
plan.
cool.
Do you guys have where do you
because
do
I'm not
most,
doing it.
Where do you do most of your stuff? Is it like pretty rural Maine or urban?
No, I'm actually right on the New Hampshire border, so
Okay.
I can walk across the river from my house to downtown Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Oh man, that's
we
badass.
we grew up in New Hampshire, Joe and I did. So
Okay,
so
but
I'm
you
still
left
kinda-
it because it
kinda
started to
local.
become too free, and you
Yeah,
said,
well, right.
"Not for us, not for us."
Yeah. Well, I lived down in Massachusetts for a number of years.
Oh, Christ.
And then we actually, my wife and I, with our two young kids, spent about 2 years traveling, and then ended up here in Maine.
In
So I
Maine.
got my sister's up this way. My parents are up here in the summer, and so it all just kind of, we didn't need to be in Boston anymore. So this made a lot more sense for us.
Cool. That's really
Maine.
cool.
We like it. So we actually were moving to a freer place from where we had been,
Yeah,
which was Massachusetts. But
That's
that's
true.
not saying much.
you can basically just go in any direction and
You're
accomplish
right.
the task,
Except
for straight to
Vermont.
Queens where Bird is.
Yeah, don't go to Vermont and don't go to Queens.
Right.
So you moved from the free state to the very free state? Like, how did are you gonna start your off brand of that now?
Yeah, well, it's funny because since we grew up in New Hampshire, they have the Free Staters who I've been kind of getting involved with over the last couple of years. They have this phrase pre-stater, which is there's this technicality in the Free State Project where people who already lived in New Hampshire
Yeah.
couldn't sign a pledge saying that they were going to move to New Hampshire.
Oh, really? I thought
but
that they actually
you can still
added
sign
that.
up, whatever. But,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so they call them pre-staters. So I guess I was a pre-stater, although I'm now, I guess they have another term, which is a de-stater, which is someone who comes to the free state and then ends up leaving. So I'm kind of a pre-stater and a de-stater, but I guess I haven't technically been officially a free stater.
Wow.
I think those two
Although-
things cancel each other out. So
Yeah.
I think you're still good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I've sponsored Pork Fest and spoke at Pork Fest the last couple of years.
Nice.
Yeah.
And
I heard your
I
last
just
one when you were talking about I think down in Panama when you were down in Panama. Is that
yes, yeah, that was actually at the Free Coast Festival, which is
okay.
a
I think that was your
local,
last in
free
architecture.
state group. Yeah,
episode,
it was.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was a fun.
that was really good. Really, really good. I enjoyed
Oh,
that.
thank you. Thanks. Yeah. Yeah, that was fun. We got a good
Man, you guys have like a
feedback on that.
wealth of freedom stuff going on up there. Because I always look for what to do around here in Texas, and it's like it's in one sense Texas does have some kind of spirit of freedom, but in then another sense they just really don't. Like it's kind of like the bad right wingy stuff, and we just don't have a good Freedom Festival or Liberty Festival or conference or anything like that. Unless I'm like crazy overlooking something. I know the Mises Institute does stuff down near Ron Paul down in Lake Jackson, but nothing like Pork Fest or something like that.
Frequent, but don't you guys usually host the LP convention?
Well, yeah, I mean, I meant like really free stuff, Bird.
Yeah, I know, but I meant like you can definitely go down there as we will and make it free
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
nuts.
Freedom Train incoming. Whoop, whoop. Honking down from Fort Worth.
Yeah, no, it's cool, and that's kind of what I was talking about in that episode. Is that I've been really blown away by the Free State community up here, and kind of just seeing what they've been able to do, and that they really have been able to build a community, which is part of the reason they picked New Hampshire, is that it's a small state and you can actually get around and see people and
Right.
kind of get groups of people together pretty easily. And I mean, the festivals they do are great, and they bring in some big names, which is cool for me because I'm here. It's like all these people are coming to me. But beyond that, they have like weekly you could probably do something like go out and do a Free State event or meetup or something like every night of the week.
Wow.
If you wanted to.
Wow.
There's just tons of stuff going on with that community. And beyond that, I mean, it's like they all they all hang out, It's like they all just it's like this is the crowd that they're all in the same boat where they've all moved here without knowing a lot of people, and so they've met each other, and there are, especially for new movers who come in, there's a lot of ways that they get them engaged with other people, and so it's really impressive, and it's a really that speech I gave in our last episode 20, was on the theme of community, and it's really been this emergent kind of powerful natural community. It's as I said in that talk, it's not even like the idea was that, we're going to get together and build a commune in New Hampshire, of libertarians. It's like the idea was that all these individual people came here on their own, and then they just hooked up and do their own thing, and it's working for everybody. So
right, build it like organically from ground up, and just let people associate as they need to, and so on and so forth. Is there a reason that you're living across the river in Maine? Like, is there a tax reason or something like that? We were looking in Portsmouth at the time, but we got a bit more for our money over the river, and we're and the location here, as I said, I can walk over to kind of downtown Portsmouth, which is a really cool little town, and we like the community where we are here. My kids are in school now, and so we've really been getting invested in the community over here. So it's a cool town. And we have, we're really close to a lot of amenities in New Hampshire too. So. Cool. Berto, what do you think, man? I know you've been looking for a place to go escaping Queens. You think Portsmouth on the other side of the river?
I'll be dead before I move farther up. After this winter, I think this winter was the one that made me go, I can't do this.
Yeah, you guys are still getting slammed, huh?
Ridiculous. I think we got snow 2 days ago, and now it's like 50 degrees out. It doesn't make sense anymore.
You guys get a lot of snow up there in Portsmouth?
This has been a weird winter. Like Bird said, it's been a lot of kind of like super cold and then like pretty warm. And we've only had a couple of storms. It's been really kind of sporadic, but we didn't get that much this year. But I will say that about 5 years ago, when I was living in Boston, in the month of February, we had 3 storms where we got a total of about 8 feet of snow.
Jesus.
So that's the worst I've seen it.
Wait, was that when Buffalo got nailed and right before a Bills game or something like that?
Dude,
and all
Buffalo's
those pictures were coming out of
getting
people?
nailed. You got to specify that one because Buffalo gets nailed every day.
You just described every Buffalo game I've ever watched.
Yeah, every day in Buffalo, it's fucking snowing.
Yeah, I went to school up in Rochester.
Oh,
and,
God.
I had one spring break. We got something like 3 feet in like overnight, and it was like the day spring break was starting, and like the airport was shut down. Like everyone just got stuck on campus. And I was supposed to be flying out to Colorado to go skiing, and my trip got delayed by like 3 days. We're sitting there. They were like starting to run out of food in the cafeteria and stuff because like they couldn't get stuff in.
Yeah,
it was ridiculous.
Jeez. Yeah, they get a lot of snow. They get so much snow up there, like that lake effect stuff.
Yeah, it's horrible.
I looked at Jay's Peak or something like that in northern Vermont.
Yeah,
just gets a shitload of snow up there too. I really want to go skiing in the Northeast somewhere. Not necessarily because it's definitely not better than Colorado, but because I've never been up there. Sorry, did I step on toes there?
It's got to be different in Colorado.
I don't know.
I thought that was a fairly safe statement.
Let's put it this way. Let's put it this way.
I can't speak. It's uncontroversial, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, I put it this way: the Colorado ski mountains are better, but the New England skiers are better.
Oh, okay.
Because when you learn to ski out here, I mean, you basically learn to ski and ice skate at the same time.
What kind of skiing do you do? I got a friend who does skiing, but like vertical drop skiing. Like what kind of skiing?
Yeah, I'll do whatever. Yeah,
because I mean, in New
snowboard,
York,
but yeah.
In New York, we have Whiteface Mountain, which is like you know about this? It's like one of the highest vertical drops in the East Coast. It has to be. So I mean, it's got to be a different feeling than doing it in Colorado. It just has to be an overall different feeling.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on where you go and like what kind of terrain you're looking for, I'm sure. But one thing that I really like is backcountry, and I just don't think the Northeast has backcountry.
No, I know you're a fan of backcountry.
There's not a lot of that.
Yeah.
There's one place called Mad River Glen, which is like all sort of ungroomed,
Yep.
which is pretty gnarly. But yeah, it's probably pales in comparison to pretty much anything you'll find in Colorado in terms of backcountry.
We don't have like bowls, just like open bowls out here or anything like that. And we just don't get the same snow you guys get. I mean, we don't get the powder.
Yeah, man, dude. I mean, well, I grew up ski. Well, I mean, I grew up surfing mostly, but I grew up snowboarding in the Southeast. We used to go from college. We used to go to Snowshoe in West Virginia, and then I went to I skied in Virginia, North Carolina, and man, you want to talk about some shit. Oh, I lived in DC for a while, and I skied freaking Liberty Mountain in Maryland, like 45 minutes outside of DC. Just a nightmare. I mean, you're lucky to be ice skating. Usually, you're just skipping from gravel stone to gravel stone.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, Colorado was awesome. I mean, I dove in head first because it's just so good, and the season's so long. Like the season lasts from early October until like I skied. My birthday's in mid-June, and I skied my birthday every time I was out there, or every year that I was out there.
Yeah, that's nice.
I can't wait to live back in Colorado because it will be a content machine.
Oh yeah, man, I can't wait. I'll be here for another like year, and then I'm.
Oh, is it a year now? Oh, so you're gonna when the LP convention rolls around, that's like your big bang. Actually,
yeah, man, that'll probably be my send off. Hopefully.
Yeah. All right, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Tim and Joe, we've talked about like occupational licensure before. I think we've done actually pretty much a dedicated episode to it, but that's like the most immediately obvious in terms of freedom and what you guys do and what you have in common with me. Idea that I had. I don't know do you guys have anything specific that you were looking to talk about or anything like that, or just shoot the shit and bash the state?
Well, we've prepared a case to prosecute the Agenda 21 conspiracy.
Oh,
what exactly is that?
About that?
What exactly is that? Before we start, because now my mouth is watering.
Okay, yeah, I'm frothing.
What is this? I didn't know there was a conspiracy coming.
Intro, Joe.
You can't just do this to me.
So this is a UN agenda which was developed which came out in 1992, and it is nothing less than the plan to categorize and control every single resource on Earth.
Oh, this
by the one world government.
Yep.
Oh, I know about this. Yeah, I do.
That's what it is.
Okay, are we just gonna set up a conspiracy court real quick?
We should set up a conspiracy court real quick. I actually wanted to ask these guys about some other stuff, but Jesus, I didn't know we were doing conspiracy court.
Yeah, just table that.
Yeah. Let's hear some of that, and then I need to ask you two questions after we're done. But we need to hear about this one. Set this one up.
Okay. So all right. So I'll just reassume my role as judge. How about that? And then
judge? Oh, I didn't know. Oh, this is exciting. I didn't.
Yeah,
okay,
I'm back.
I'm defense over here. You'll be the judge.
Yeah.
And Joe and Tim are the prosecution.
Yeah, I think we might have flipped that one the wrong way, but
yeah. All right, Joe, take it away. What do we got? Who's the perpetrators? What kind of evidence we got? Give us a rundown, or Tim, whoever hot potato.
Yeah, to Tim, I think you're probably a bit better on the history of how this thing came about.
Well, let's start with the history. Let's start with from the beginning. Yeah. First of all, what is the UN?
All right, so let me I'll back this up a little. So as Joe said, that the term Agenda 21 was the name of a document that was produced in 1992 after the 1991 Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, which was, I guess, the first. I mean, there had been some other kind of Earth sustainability type of conferences before that, but this was like the first real big one that got all these nations involved and excuse me, all that. But before that, where this all came from.
We'll edit that out, Tim. Don't worry about it. Just for everybody, Tim just cleared his throat. Very unprofessional podcaster, not like Bird.
I'm not gonna.
We got it. We'll edit that out. Post. Don't worry about it.
Sorry, my mouth is watering here too.
What if that was the whole episode?
We just that's it, man. We'll clear our throats for 25 more minutes and then just Grateful Dead it out.
Yeah. Can we do an episode like that one day, please?
Yes.
All right. So the where this all came from. Why don't I go backwards in time here? So
yeah, why not?
We had this Earth Summit.
Yeah.
Before that, in 1987. There was a document, or there was a commission, or I don't know if it was an event or what, but something called the Brundtland Commission.
The what?
The Brundtland Commission, named after someone named Gro Harlem Brundtland.
That is a powerful name.
Oh yeah, you got to know about that dude in particular. He was an interesting guy.
Wait, what? So it's Gro Harlem Brundtland?
Yeah, it's I remember this distinctly. His name is GRO space middle name. I think it's his middle name. It's actually a woman, isn't it?
It's a woman.
Yeah.
It's a woman.
It's a woman.
That's insane.
GRO because you know how the Dutch. Listen to me, Car. Listen to me. You know how the Dutch do. You know how the Dutch do. I think she's Dutch. She probably isn't.
Jesus.
Gro.
Yeah.
And then it's Harlem, like the town.
Right.
And then it's Brundtland. It is a dick out type of name.
Yeah, that's on the tip.
I don't know why. I think I know this because is she not the director of she was the director of the World Health Organization, right?
Do you know, Joe? What?
I don't.
Well, let's put it this way. Her one claim to fame that's probably relevant to what we're talking about is at one time she was the vice president of the World Socialist Party.
Oh yes,
man,
that would make sense. Why she was the health minister? Yeah.
This Brundtland Commission was commissioned by the UN to basically come up with a definition or come up with some kind of a plan or recommendations about this concept of sustainable development. And so that's where this term sustainable development was coined. And it was, I don't have a verbatim in front
Oh my
of
God,
me,
that's where that came from?
Yeah. And the definition is it's the ability to meet the needs of the current generation without
sacrificing the needs of future generations or something like that.
Thank you.
Oh, right. So capitalism.
Right.
Dude,
so
I'm just having like flashbacks to so many meetings where I'm listening to city officials tell me like sustainable development.
If you think this,
taking my construction documents and just lighting them on fire.
Yeah,
this is going to be. This episode is going to. It's going to be a world of hurt for you, Carr. Either that or some sort of vindication.
If you think this UN shit is bad, you got to listen into some of the fucking international relations conferences where they talk about bombing people for freedom.
Well, we'll get to that. That's all part of Agenda 21. So
probably.
Yeah. Everything's part of Agenda 21.
Even Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
I wonder if the Saudis.
He was 23.
So, let's see. So anyway, just to put this in context, to put this all in context, you go back a little further, and the Brundtland Commission, and then eventually this 1991 Earth Summit were initiated by a guy named Maurice Strong, who was kind of a longtime UN functionary, and was also an oil man. He came up in Canada and was involved in the oil patches off and on down there. So he kind of alternated throughout his career from being this oil magnate and being, the guy who was leading the sustainable development movement throughout the world, which is a little odd. But anyways, and he kind of, of course, growing up in oil and everything, there are associations there with the Rockefellers. I don't know how you want to go into all that stuff, but a lot of the mentality that I think led to this point in 1992 where they put this document together, has its beginning in some even, all right, well, just to put it out there, you go back to like the eunics movements of
the 20s and 30s and whatnot.
Exactly. So the idea there is that, that people, humans are somehow a problem for the earth, or certain humans, let's say, are a problem for the earth, and
Right.
the way to let's say the way to get rid of poverty among humanity is basically to get rid of humans who tend to be poor. Based on
are we doing this again with owning the poor? It's like, what is this?
We just finished an episode. We released it today with the Damn Woods Boys that we were talking about. Like, there's a random Wikipedia article that just out of the blue dunked on the poor with the first line.
Everyone wants to dunk on the poor. Jesus Christ.
That's just wild.
Yeah. So I mean, anyway, so that that'll happen.
Hold on. I'm not like the idea of like everything's relative. So if you get rid of all quote unquote the poor people, then just the next people down the chain are now the poor people.
Right?
Like, it's like we just added. What if you just added 1 million new people that were even poorer than the poor right now? Then you get rid of those poor people because they're no longer poor.
That's a good idea.
Well, this is what's crazy about it is, I mean, you can read into it whatever motivations you want, but there's this idea of kind of perfecting humanity, right? So that you're somehow, and this get all the eugenic stuff with birth control and stuff, they're trying to get people who, let's say, haven't shown that they can be very productive, within humanity, to not reproduce as much because they think that there's, that was all the eugenic stuff of the 20s and 30s, right?
Yep.
Which, and this wasn't like, we don't have to get into too much, but this wasn't like this crazy theory back then. This was like mainstream.
No, yeah, it was Margaret Sanger.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, dude. And we don't dip our toes into this topic all that often. Thank fucking God.
I was gonna say you better have your hands on the wheel to shift right away from this topic.
Yeah.
Once you're finished saying what you're saying.
I was presented recently, and I know that everybody, like a lot of people listening to this are like, yeah, no shit, you idiot. But I was presented recently with like the racial breakdown of abortions and stuff like that, and I was absolutely fucking blown away.
Oh yeah,
blown away.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know
it's
why
wild.
people say so hard that Margaret Sanger wasn't like an awful racist, but she was like an open and avowed member of the eugenics community. It's like, in the 20s, you didn't have one or the other.
Right.
It was just the same thing. Yeah. Now we
crazy. Fucking crazy.
Now we fly right away from that.
Didn't she speak at some KKK rally or something like that?
I would not doubt it for a second, especially since in the 1920s the KKK was like
cool.
The Democrat
poppin'.
Party.
Yeah.
They were cool.
Well, they were the Ku Klux Klan. Oh God.
1920s KKK. Carr says is cool.
Cool.
The Ku Klux Klan. Oh Christ, that's the name of the episode.
It's like in my Twitter bio. Sneak that in. See how long it takes.
You're taking the joke way too far. Yeah. Jesus.
Maybe I'll experiment with like time periods. Like I'll slip it in for like 4 minutes one day, and then maybe 5 minutes the next day.
But now that I'm thinking about this,
what's next?
Now that I'm thinking about this, the eugenics movement is the 20s, but this happens in 97 is the first one, right? So what's the connection? Like what
all right, so shifting it forward, there was a certain point in history where eugenics, you couldn't really talk about it much anymore as in positive terms.
Yeah.
Let's just say.
Probably somewhat after 1940 to 1945 in Germany.
Around then. Yeah.
Thereabouts.
Give or take, yeah. And so, however, there was still some of this mentality out there. Guys like, again, some of these Rockefeller guys like, David Rockefeller, and I don't know who all these guys are, but they would have these conferences about, it wasn't about eugenics anymore, but it was about population, and that population growth was seen as this big problem. And you have, let's just say you have people kind of coming in, and they're not talking specifically about which parts of the population we want to get rid of, but they're saying we've got to stop like this growing population in the world. So that gets into like the 1970s with like the Club for Growth was it the whole peak oil theory that came out then. And then
Paul
at the
Ehrlich
same
with
time,
the population bomb.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Paul Ehrlich. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So this was a big kind of widespread fear and widespread topic of discussion, kind of in the 1970s, was slowing down population growth out of fear of kind of overuse of resources, right? Exploiting resources, overexploiting resources.
Yep.
All that.
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
it's basically like neo-Malthusianism,
right?
So Malthus was the guy that came out with the original idea that population grows exponentially, but say agriculture, resource production only grows linearly, and so so it was destined to outstrip the Earth's resources at some point, and then the argument really hasn't changed much since then.
Have you read or been exposed to or read any Robert Zubrin?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, he had some great commentary on that. I don't agree with him on a lot, but he wrote Merchants of Despair.
Okay.
And it has a subtitle, but it was really, really interesting. Talking about how like anti-human a lot of those theories were.
Yeah.
So into this mix comes this guy Maurice Strong, and he started, I think it's called the UN Environmental Program or something like that, which had a different name earlier on. And so he had done some stuff kind of in the 60s and 70s, I think, developing as broader ideas were growing, with like Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, these kind of broader ideas.
I don't think I've heard of that. What is that?
Environmentalism. So Silent Spring was a book that is more or less credited, I think, with starting a lot of the modern environmental movement, where Rachel Carson had written about DDT, the pesticide DDT, as of course, being this terrible chemical that has all these impacts on the environment and animals, and I guess ultimately people and everything. And so that was, I think, a wake up call for a lot of people that these kind of industrial products that we as humans are putting out into the world could be causing problems and could be creating these problems in the environment that are really hard to reverse, these persistent toxic chemicals, things like that. And so all these kind of ideas about population concerns and running out of resources and kind of destroying the environment through the products of industrialization and all this. This is all kind of coming together into the 1970s. It's becoming, I think, more popularized in the 1980s. And then in 1991, you have this Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, where all these now governments are getting together to say, okay, here are all these problems. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to meet the needs of the present in other words, allow for development, keep developing the world out there, while preserving the ability to meet the needs for future generations. So that's kind of the backstory here. And I guess we could get into,
your prosecution, my friend. Well, and you got to convince me and get past Bird.
The UN is a good company. It's full of good people. They do a lot of good work. They've stopped a lot of wars.
Yep. Sounds convincing, Bird. All right.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, that's what a lot of these people actually believe, is that we've got, if as long as everyone's under the same government, then you can't have wars between those, So what they say is we have anarchy between nations, and that's why there's wars. Okay. Because there's no government sitting on top to prevent these wars.
I want to start talking about IR so badly, but we can't.
What is that?
International relations, like that. I'd love to talk about that.
Sorry, I didn't get your fancy acronym.
My fancy language.
Lingo.
Infrared?
Your insider lingo.
Sorry. my UN language, my UN shill language. I guess we got to go through means of implementation, right? Because that's where the conspiracy has to come in, I'm sure. Because the idea of we got a population and climate control, on its face, of course, that's sinister because we can make it sinister, but it also could be done in a very non-sinister way. I don't think that's the case with the UN. So let's get into the means of implementation here. Like, what are we looking at and how?
All right. So we've got a list here of basically kind of like the key kind of themes that people get worked up about with this thing.
Perfect. Okay.
So, all right. So number one, we've got. Okay, actually, so let me just introduce this. We've got these broken down into 4 kind of sections. So there's personal, local, national, and global.
Okay.
So the personal ones.
First of all,
we've got the top-down control of all resources, land, and people.
That is terrible. What does that mean? What does that mean? First of all, what does that mean? Control of all people.
That is insanity.
Well, we'll get into how that supposedly works.
Okay.
But essentially what this is it's a lot of people would call it either communist or fascist or whatever, some other maybe socialist.
Fucking neoliberalism, like guys. It's fucking peak neoliberalism.
That's very close to it. But I think the most accurate is simply technocracy.
Yeah.
The idea that it's basically it's controlled by scientists or
wasn't that the idea behind like a lot of the early 20th century Marxist movements too? Was that it was like science is going to make this so that it's more efficient than free markets?
Yeah, well, technocracy was like an official movement.
Oh, okay.
Like in the 40s.
Yeah, right around the same time or after Taylorism. Yeah, it's kind of the same idea.
Yeah, and it was actually like sort of created by this guy who was like a complete fraud and shyster, and he somehow insinuated himself into like Columbia University, and basically got a position there for a while until they kind of figured him out that he was just a complete fraud. He didn't have a degree in anything or anything like that. He wasn't actually an academic.
Nice. That actually makes me root for him a little bit.
He's just a con man. And
I have a tremendous bachelor's degree.
It's tremendous. Can we see it? No.
No. Wrong.
Trust me, it's great.
It's such a good degree. It's not on a single paper.
Some say it's a doctorate.
I'm a doctor.
Call me doctor. Call me daddy.
Call me Dr. Daddy in the White House.
That would be a great executive order. I think I would support. Is if everybody had to call Trump daddy.
I like the executive orders when it's just floor. It's like here's what I want to do. It's ridiculous.
Right. Daddy. Daddy Don.
It would be great if he just completely owned the country by making all the people who don't like him it's illegal not to call him daddy.
Call him daddy.
it would only be if you don't like him.
Yes.
It would be so terrible and yet it would be hilarious.
Dude, I would love it. I would support that. I would support that executive order.
I would support total fascism for the lols.
Fascism, but ironically.
Oh, God. Yeah, that whole technocracy and Taylorist shit, like, you're right, Carl. Like, the Marxists tried to scientificate all their ideas, too. But let's not forget that when neoliberalism hit, it was all about technology. It was all in on maximizing efficiency and just promoting this strange anti-human utilitarian framework. It's very strange. And the UN seems to kind of love doing that. Just saying, well, how can we make this the most efficient? You know, the organization that is probably one of the least efficient organizations that has ever existed, and yet it's so...
What do they even do?
What is the UN?
All right, I work for the UN. What is 8 a.m.? What am I doing?
Here's the thing. The UN is an idea. It's not one... It's not one thing, right? So if I had to point at the UN, I'd point at the Security Council, because ultimately they make the big decisions we all hear about. But
there's other people there, right? Like, what are they doing? 8:30. 8:30 rolls around.
Nothing. I mean, they're not. Isn't one UN, right? There's not one office.
I can tie this in here to this whole, web that we're spinning.
Yeah,
that was very very well put. Just very delicate.
The UN. I mean, so you look at where the UN building is in New York City, right?
Right. That's one.
The land there. The land for the UN building was actually donated by the Rockefeller family.
What?
And they were very much again. I'm not Can I get a sidebar here from the conspiracy court?
Okay.
I'll grant it.
I generally don't like go deep on the Rockefeller kind of conspiracy theory stuff.
Well, welcome to the podcast, my friend. Let's dive.
This is all entertainment to be, but I don't know how else to put that out there. It's out there without sounding like a radio.
We'll edit that out, right, Bird?
Yeah, I'll edit it out. Seriously, if you were going to pick one person to center conspiracy theories around, Rockefeller's going to be your guy for sure.
Yeah,
he's
right.
He's pretty.
But so asking, why do we have the UN? What do they do? So they, these guys were pretty involved with getting it set up. And the way that these guys operate, as we're going to kind of see as we get through this, is
wait. I don't mean to cut you off again, but did Rockefeller, was he big on League of Nations? Wasn't he like one of the founding guys?
I think so.
Probably.
All right, never mind.
He's an international corporatist baron. I'm sure he was into doing that.
I mean, like Federal Reserve, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I think they were involved in all that stuff.
Rockefeller.
David Rockefeller was the CEO of Chase Bank, who kind of really built out their whole international network and stuff. And anyways, so these guys, they have all the money they could ever want, right? So they're not out there to get money. So what they want to do is to get control of things, control things that they don't own yet, or that they haven't bought yet, or to take their money and to be able to use that money to kind of maximize the control and the impact that it can have. So, if they want to, let's say they want to spread a certain message about education. Right. They don't go out and just like donate money like to people to go and learn things. They start a foundation, and the foundation goes to, governments, and goes to the UN, and goes to, all these other organizations, and raises money, and then hires all these authorities in the field of whatever it is, and puts them into all these universities. And then now all of a sudden their foundation is influencing this whole branch of education across the country, right? Based on the way they started it. And so what the UN is, how the UN fits into that picture, is it's just a deep pocket, right? I mean,
yeah.
When do you ever hear anybody complaining about like the UN budget this year? Oh, the UN, they're spending too much money this year. We really need to rein in this UN spend. Like nobody has any idea what the UN spends, or how much their own country is giving to the UN or anything. It's just,
you'd be shocked at how low the number is what's funny.
Is it?
Yeah, it's actually pretty low considering it's supposed to be the world government. You'd be shocked.
I was like,
right, but
$16.
As Carr has said, they don't actually really do anything. They just
they don't.
What they do is they throw money around to all of these various foundations and various causes and various things. And so, again, when you have guys like Rockefellers and Edmund de Rothschild was really involved in this whole sustainability movement, when you have these guys out there, the UN it's just a kind of a it's a source of funding for them to leverage whatever money they want to spend on something. They start some foundation, they get the UN to fund it, and then they set all kinds of regulations and guidelines for local, for state governments, federal governments, and local governments. And so that's they basically, I guess, a long answer to what the UN does,
right? Okay.
And it kind of sets up what this Agenda 21. How it's going to operate.
Yeah, like if you were to just sum up kind of the idea of the UN, it's just a money distributor to different councils. That's it. And then the councils kind of do the work, which depending on what the council is, it could be very different. What council did Agenda 21?
Sounds like a sweet gig if you can get it.
Yeah, it's one of the sweetest gigs, apparently.
I'm a UN guy.
From having to, work with and talk to people who work in the UN, it seems kind of like you just fuck around all day.
like paper airplanes off the balcony?
No, you kind of just read all day. That's it.
Yeah.
You just read papers.
From reading the actual, Agenda 21 report, and I read a chunk of it. It's something like, I forget how long it is, 150 pages long or something like that.
Yeah.
And I read the first few chapters of it, and it is just mind-numbing, like
it's tax work,
repetitive pablum.
Yeah.
And they just from what I can tell with the UN, the main thing the UN does is produces like these reports like this, which don't actually really create or do anything. Like the outcomes of this report is basically like, oh well, each nation will develop its own plan to do this and this and this. And like so if you're fishing through this thing trying to figure out, oh okay, well what's the actual plan for implementation here? It's not actually really in there.
Oh, okay.
I mean, there's sort of guidelines, and
they don't have any legal authority to like punish you for not doing it. They don't have any legal authority to tell you how to do it. It's just, this is what we found. Do this.
Yeah. But the thing is that so based on that, what they say is, oh well, this is a voluntary agreement,
right?
You know, so it's all this stuff about one world government is bullshit because we've got. It's completely voluntary.
Yeah.
But the thing is okay, it's voluntary for like individual nations to sign up to it. But once your individual nation signs up to it and starts implementing it, that's not voluntary for you as a citizen.
Yeah, right.
or your local council signs up to it or whatever.
Yeah, they're influencing direction without actually having to defend it. Almost like they're like a big branding agency and just try to influence behavior. I don't know.
Yeah. And we'll get into kind of how this thing gets rolled out down to these kind of local levels too. And that's why don't I continue through our list here to see if we can get to number 2.
Sure.
And then
I'll do everything I can to stop you.
I'm sure.
So wait, what was number 1? Can we recap number 1?
Yeah. What was number 1 again? You guys are architects, right?
I mean, I remember. I just want everyone to know. Number 1, we're ending it now. Is
yeah. So number 1 was basically the top-down control of resources, land, and people,
control of all,
and essentially implementing a technocratic world government.
Yeah,
more or less.
Good. Sounds good. We've got a good start. This doesn't sound like a conspiracy yet. Judge,
no, sounds great.
Judge, you're ruling so far.
Fine.
Okay, good. Let's keep going.
All right. So number 2 is this is more of a how are they going to do it? So there's they want to monitor, surveil, and control every activity. So that this is where you get into stuff like smart meters, car tracking, like vehicle mileage tracking.
You hear that, car?
Or transmitters in your car, that sort of thing.
They're coming after you, buddy.
Yeah, me specifically.
Yeah, car tracking. Yeah, they're coming right after you.
That's it. Smart cities where they've got sensors and cameras and stuff everywhere with some sort of AI behind it to analyze all the data. So that's kind of number 2, and that's kind of where you get into a lot of these privacy issues and all this stuff. I mean, I've heard stuff about where I think I was listening to Alex Jones one time, and some lady calls in and talks about how some guy comes to put a smart meter on her house. And she chased him off with a shotgun or something. Oh my God! That. She's like, "You're not putting that thing near my house."
Which, by the way, as far as I know, the smart meters that are out there nowadays, it's still a one-way street. I mean, what they have is I put solar panels on my last house, which we talked about in one of our episodes, and you get this meter it's a net meter, so it measures what's going in and what's coming out in terms of the energy usage, but it's not like they can flip a switch and kill the power to your house.
Right.
Yeah. But, supposedly, what they say, I mean, that's one of the big fears is that, okay, you get this smart meter and then it's got some sort of kill switch in it, which is basically a circuit breaker. Which will, if they don't like the way you're using power, if you use too much power that month or something like that, they're gonna shut off your power.
Yeah.
Or certain times a day, when it's peak periods, they're gonna shut off your power. But
that's really what these things are, and you probably know more about this show than I do. But a lot of it is a lot of places you have peak pricing on power and stuff, so it's probably more getting a time of day recording of how much energy you're using rather than a once a month check on the total.
Well, the concern just overarching in general is, if you look at some of the things that have been implemented or they're trying to implement, I don't know if they're successful yet, but in China with the social credit score programs and stuff like that and integrating that into these programs, it may be a long way down the road, but that's really, really fucking concerning. On the other hand, as technology is growing, when you were talking about solar, I've been a big fan of solar my entire life. I actually had a little solar setup when I was a kid, out on the roof outside of my window, and it powered whatever. I had a couple LED lights and a ham radio that I had hooked all up, and it was cool because I could operate whenever the power was out, which was pretty frequently with storms in the southeast. And I just had to slip that in to kind of one up you on putting solar on your house. I was just like, yeah, I've been in it for a while, dude. Why don't you back off?
All right.
Give it to you. But the continued decentralization is such a buzzword now, but the ability to take yourself more and more off grid, quote unquote, is the natural combatant to a lot of that stuff. Like collecting rain, being able to collect rainwater. If you can go completely off grid solar, which just isn't there yet because storage sucks, but at some point there's going to be a breakthrough. There's going to be some kind of advance. And then, whether it's maybe satellite internet or I don't know exactly what the solutions there are that are the most robust, but being able to remove central authority from necessary goods and services is really, really critical.
Yeah, and that's we've talked. Sorry, Joe. We've talked about smart cities a bit on our podcast, and you can kind of look at it two ways. The big question is kind of who's getting all the data, where is it going, and what are they doing with it?
Right.
And for example, there's this one project going on right now in Toronto by a company called Sidewalk Labs, which is a sister company of Google. And the residents there have been all up in arms, about essentially privacy concerns because they're talking about putting sensors on park benches to see when someone sits on a park bench and
right.
And I've listened to some stuff with Sidewalks. There's some really cool ideas out there,
right?
But you worry about like the China example. Well, okay, so Google comes into Toronto and they develop all this cool surveillance technology, and they have a really good, solid, they're talking about making the data open source and all this stuff. And they come up with a good privacy regime there for the data, and then China picks up the phone and says, hey, Google, we like what you did in Toronto. Can you, why don't you come over here and see what you can do for us, on our 3 billion people. And so that's where this stuff gets a little scary is that, and again, you don't want to be like a Luddite, but
right.
And there's definitely some value in some of this smart city stuff, but, I think it's something we got to be really, really careful about. And I don't know how it's the kind of thing that once it's in, once you put it in there, Sidewalk Labs or whatever has a contract for 10 years to monitor this stuff. And after that, who knows what happens with this data? It gets turned over to somebody else. It gets hacked, all this stuff. So,
yeah. I mean, and that's right. As of right now, in 2019 in the United States and North America, that's really the big concern. Now you collect my data and then it gets hacked and used by some nefarious actor. Down the road, I assume the problem will truly become like, what the hell is Google going to do with the data? But right now, that's the big, as far as I can tell, the big thing is just like you have all of my data, and we see at times, especially in cryptocurrency and that type of thing, where exchanges get hacked and stuff like that. And it's like you have all this KYC AML stuff and just absolutely no regard for it. And somebody hacks that, they've got my address, they've got all these transactions, IP address, and from then, from there, you're kind of at the mercy of wherever it goes.
Yeah. All right. Well, what? I
don't know about the I'm thinking about the second one. I mean, that's. Again, it's like, is it? First of all, it absolutely terrifies me that it's completely true, but it absolutely terrifies me that the CEO of Google and the president probably talk directly on the phone to one another. That just scares the shit out of me just to think about that, first of all. Second of all, what scares me even more is that, and I'm going to lay my cards on the table here, I don't hate the UN. As somebody who has to work with people in the UN, I see the good that the UN can do, but it's the same statist monsters who do the UN, who do every other government. And so, you're going to have this not only in the UN, but sort of every country's been working on these. I mean, Saudi Arabia's got smart cities going. China's got social credit going, it's this has been building for a very long time. And so while it is scary, I almost wish I was scared earlier. You know what I mean? I wish I would have known earlier. I could have taken a proactive stance against this, right? It's creepy, man. I don't know. I don't even know if you can call this a conspiracy theory, right? Because documents are all there. Yeah, documents are all there. People who are involved are absolutely ready and willing to do everything in there as Machiavellianly as possible.
Well, and I'll tell you what, is I see this stuff, the smart city stuff. Like I still have to do continuing education, and like I see that shit as offerings for online classes and stuff is on smart cities, and I've taken one just out of curiosity, and yeah, man, I mean that's real. It's real.
Oh yeah.
I think I live in a dumb smart city, so I kind of see how it'll eventually go, but New York is still so bloated that it's kind of dumb about it. Like, there's cameras on every corner, but they're still manually operated, right? Like, there's, it's things like that. It's like the technology's there, it's just the incompetence isn't. So, from FEMA Camp 2, this creeps me out, but it's almost just life at this point, right? That's what's so creepy about it. Get your torrents and your bit torrents and your onion. Get that all out.
Onion routing.
Yeah, do all that.
That's the thing with all this, pretty much this whole Agenda 21 thing. It's not that Agenda 21 is itself a conspiracy. I mean, you can download the PDF document from the UN's website. It's the conspiracy is in, okay, what's the real intent behind this, and what's the sort of slippery slope that it's going to go down.
Right. I think you can look at it and go, the real intent is in those documents, which honestly, again, and working with people who are in the UN, most of them are seriously just ideologically driven people. They really believe the thing they put.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
they're all that's the feeling I get from all this stuff.
Right. That's what's so sinister is they believe it, and because they believe it, they'll do whatever.
Yeah.
We talk about pushing our red button. If that red button was there, people would push that red button, and a lot of people would be terrified about that red button being pushed and ending the state. These people have a red button. They'll press it as much as we would. That's what's so scary.
Well, and they are, they're pushing it incrementally.
Oh yeah,
every day.
Yep, right. Which has to tell you something about what they recognize about their own idea. That that if it can't be implemented rapidly, why not? Why not? Is it the people who notice?
Well, that's like the so there's this Agenda 21, and more recently they did this Agenda 2030, which was essentially just a re-up of the Agenda 21 stuff.
They just narrowed in on the date.
They basically said, look, it's not really, we kind of want all this stuff to be working by the start of the 21st century. We're not quite there yet. Let's just, how about we set a target for 2030? And so, you get like the Green New Deal. What's her name? Ocasio-Cortez, coming out saying, if we don't act within 12 years, the world's going to end. Well, 12 years from now is 2030, which is, like the whole Green New Deal thing is basically just as a sort of a race car implementation of all this stuff, Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and all this stuff. And it's interesting because they've almost like gone a bit too fast, and everyone's actually going, hey, well, this actually sounds kind of crazy, like this is actually what you want to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Man, that was point 2. How many points did you say you had?
We've got 12.
Woo! Woo! Where did you find these points? Because we're not going to be able to do all 12. So where can people find these points?
Pick your favorite 11. We'll just do 11.
Well, look, I mean, they all kind of overlap and stuff a bit too.
Yeah,
so,
they're gonna start to overlap as you go up the.
All right, let's keep going. Let's keep going.
But let's crank through. So the next one is of course one that libertarians would be pretty concerned about, which would be like, when they're building these smart growth and smart cities and all this stuff, the idea of they'll be using eminent domain as one of their means to do it. And this is something that I think is pretty explicit in some of the Agenda 21 documents and all this stuff.
That's where the fascism comes from. There it is.
Yeah, it's eminent domain. It's stuff like where they'll kind of rezone your property so that the next time you go to do some sort of renovation on it, you find out that you can't do that because of whatever some new setback that they've put in or zoning or whatever.
Fuck, man! Don't talk about setbacks and zoning in this space. This is my safe space.
Getting triggered? Is that your trigger?
Oh my god!
You hear zoning and you just start like foaming at the mouth.
Well, that's what this. I mean, that's one of these big. That's where you actually see some opposition to this Agenda 21 at the local level. Is that people are coming out when a town puts through some kind of new town, town plan or some new zoning ordinance, that you have had locals in some areas coming out and saying, well, this is Agenda 21. I don't want you taking my property. I don't want you taking my property rights. Which is what zoning is, which is what all these,
and that's that's something that I struggle with, because that is the most. I don't think that, not to launch into it, but I'm not a political guy, and I don't think that the answer is political action. But that is probably one of the most persuasive arguments to me, is like, you don't realize how much, especially until you've been in that industry, you don't realize how much power the Planning Commission has, and entities like that. And that's truly local. Now, are you getting a paycheck, and are you, you're technically a part of government, but Planning Council, you're meeting once every Thursday, or one Thursday a month, or whatever it is, and just voting up or down on shit. And, dude, they have so much power over over everything. That is a really, really great way to fight a lot of that stuff. I mean, you can't because all the municipality ordinances are already written, and so it would be it would be illegal to alter them without generally some kind of planning commission resolution or something like that.
You could have said that a different way. It would have been funnier. It would be illegal to do that,
Yeah, I know. It's weird, but
it would be illegal.
Yeah.
Can you believe this?
It is illegal. That was almost like Ron Paulian.
Yeah, it is illegal.
Like a weird mouse squeal. Illegal. But I mean, that's an incredible way to fight a lot of that stuff, and that's truly, you're just really bare bones defending property rights.
Yeah, right. Well, and that's one of the big things. This is probably getting into one of the other points here, so we can kind of kill two birds with one stone here, not to offend any birds who may be on the call here.
Offend them.
Is essentially the way this whole thing gets implemented is that you have these local city councils basically working directly with the UN or taking on these sort of planning protocols and stuff that have been drawn up by the UN. And I think, Tim, you've looked into like how, what is it, the APA?
Well, essentially, yeah. I mean, so the way that I mean, we started going through how this all got implemented, and essentially you had this Agenda 21, which put out this blase document that Joe was talking about. And then there were some other documents, written after that, and then that started to, I mean, basically really just started to influence the discussions about, I mean, this idea of sustainable development was something that a lot of people latched onto pretty quickly, especially people in the planning community, certainly in the architecture world. Green building, green design is huge now. That really all came out kind of towards the end of the
low impact design and all that shit.
Yeah, lid, whatever,
Yeah, well, both lid and lead.
Yep. And so that's kind of how a lot of this stuff has come down, is that, again, none of this, like, there's no federal, I mean, there are federal regulations related to a lot of this stuff, but, like Bill Clinton created some like new department for environmental something that was apparently based on this. But essentially these recommendations all get kind of written down and distilled down, and you have organizations like the American Planning Association, who starts to really document and again put out more documents and recommendations for their members about, well, this is a proper way to handle a planning process within a town. When a town wants to go through and do a comprehensive plan, these are the things you ask, these are the things you should care about, and they kind of direct that whole discussion. So that goes kind of directly, it kind of bypasses the federal government, bypasses sometimes even the state government, and goes right to the local, where a local government will hire, a planner to come in and work with the town, and they have all kinds of town hearings and meetings and workshops and all this stuff to get people together to say what's important to you in this town, what are your value. And I've gone to some of these just in my own town, locally, just to kind of see what the process is. And it's kind of thing where people write things down in sticky notes and they put them up all around the room, and then they take all that back and then they summarize it and they say, this is what we've heard, this is what we think your priorities are, and they spell out this whole thing. That's kind of how the planning process worked. And then they eventually come up with maybe a master plan for the town that might have more or less detail, whether it could just be a zoning type of things where they're saying this zone is going to be residential, this zone we're going to allow multifamily, this zone is going to be mixed use, commercial, whatever. Or it can get very detailed where they're saying, this street is going to be designed this way. There's all these philosophies about the best way to design a street now to incorporate bike traffic and buses and pedestrians and all that kind of stuff. They even get into architectural design, where if it's like a historic district, they'll say, every house, you have to have a gable roof on your house. You can't have flat roofs. Houses along this street are all going to have front porches and be in, have columns and what. They can get very specific, some of these design guidelines for the buildings that might eventually get built.
Right. I don't think people realize how insane the detail is on zoning and how to build a building. And that is something that I don't think that people that are not in that world realize. I mean, they will outline percentages of window that you need to have showing on a certain side of a street, percentages of masonry, rhythms and articulations and all of that all along the side of the building. And I mean, they will make it look conform to the way that they want it to look. And I mean, you go in a lot of the time. I mean, there are projects that you are just by the shape of the lot and by the zoning restrictions where there's basically just one way you can design it. Like it's exactly. Just, you're like, okay, take ADA and all the zoning regulations and here's just what you get. Like I have absolutely no flexibility to do anything. This is it.
Right.
Parking requirements, all that crap.
Yeah. So anyway, that's really how this gets worked down from the UN, Agenda 21 down to the local level, is that it's really become part of the zeitgeist, I think, in the planning community and in the architectural community and among town planners, town governments. It's really just they've generated the demand for this kind of thing. The problem is that the thing that people are demanding is something that other people already own, which is, their own property.
Yeah, right.
And the ability to build on it.
You got to remember it's an action plan, so it's not even binding. Like you said, it's quote unquote voluntary, but the United States in particular, I mean, has a vested interest in doing this anyway. As you said, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is basically saying the same things Agenda 21 was saying. I got to peruse through the documents, but I believe you there. Yeah, that's almost what's more sinister, is that it's just a suggestion. Yeah. It's like, it's not even binding. It's not even obvious. It's just, hey, do this. And then the U.S., which almost will never ratify a UN treaty into the Senate, will still follow these things because it recognizes, hey, we could take this and use it distinctly for ourselves. We don't have to follow what they say, but maybe some of this centralization here we could use. Yeah, that's so sinister about it.
And I mean, it's ultimately implemented on the local level.
Level, it's absolutely.
Yep. And it seems, and all it takes is one smooth brain at the fucking city council to go say, oh my God, look at, the river district in this one city. And they implemented all of these things and have absolutely no clue on what it takes to implement it or the sacrifices that you're going to make. And that's. Yeah.
And especially local level politics is all about winning, right? And so it has nothing to do with appealing to anybody. It's just about winning. And so, if this idea wins, if you can sugarcoat it enough, and people have been very willing to have this idea implemented around them. You're right. It's kind of creepy how bottom up it actually is.
Yeah. Well, in these planning meetings too. So there's this book by Rosa Corey is her name, and she's a real anti-Agenda 21 person. Mm-hmm. She's got she created this thing called Democrats Against Agenda 21. Like she's actually comes very much from the left, mainstream leftist kind of person. But she's actually her job is she's basically like an appraiser for Caltrans, the California Transit Company, which is a state organization. And she basically, her job is to appraise, like when they do an eminent domain taking or whatever. Her job is like to appraise the property, to work out how much they'd pay the person for the thing. But she kind of got into this very much unaware of what it all was, just based on like getting involved in her local community up in like Sonoma, where all like some of this stuff was starting to happen. That there was like this big redevelopment project that she was opposed to, and just going through all this stuff, she kind of found her way into this whole thing, and ultimately realized that it's all going to come down from this Agenda 21 stuff. And she talks about these planning meetings. What she says is that they're actually what she calls a Delphi mind control process, which sounds awesome. What it is basically, she says, essentially the whole meeting is framed to achieve a certain conclusion. So so you get everybody in there so that you can say like, oh look, we've got buy-in from all these people, from all the locals. But during the course of the meeting, you kind of frame stuff in a certain way, and then you kind of pick and choose, which suggestions you put up on the board to essentially marginalize any opposition to the project.
Yeah.
Well, it's all these. Sorry, Joe. I'm thinking of one recent meeting that I went to, and it's these questions they ask. It's all these false choices. So it's like, do you value historic properties? And it's like, well, who's going to say no to that, right? But what they're really asking is, should the government should your local government,
right? Yeah,
have more control over the development of historic properties and things like that. Do you develop green open space? Do you
do you see
how
utilitarian it is? It's just. We already know that government is the most efficient. So here, how do we like? Do you want to be efficient or not? It's all. Right. It's so I'm telling you, dude. It's neoliberals.
Yeah.
Blaming the neolibs today, gents.
When can we start owning the neolibs?
Yeah, right. When can we turn on the neolibs?
Destroying historic buildings to own the neolibs.
That's it. Jesus, what was that? 3?
Yeah.
Or 4.
So another thing about these kind of local, the way this whole global to local thing works is that this is so we're actually ticking off a couple of our other items here.
Good.
Which is good. We're making progress.
All right.
Ahead a little bit.
We got to make this our Agenda 22 is to get through this list.
You guys should have seen the outline that we gave to Tom Woods when he had us on his program.
Did you give it to Tom Woods?
He opened it. He's like, we're not going to get into any of this stuff.
Did you
He was like, actually, we're not talking about any of this. We're going to talk about Bigfoot.
Yeah.
That would have been rad.
Yeah. So this. So this is something that people who tend to be more nationalists get all worked up about, because basically what they say is, oh look, well because of this process you're bypassing any of our national state government checks and balances, democratic checks and balances, and so you're essentially having these, and what they're also doing is they're creating these like regional boards, which are it's not like a state board, it's a region, so it's not. It's basically an NGO, essentially, a non-governmental organizations, and basically the slippery slope theory is that these NGO or these regional boards are becoming the new governments, that are controlling all these local communities and all this, so essentially what kind of nationalist people get worked up about is, this is it's destroying our national sovereignty, and there's no checks and balances. Which as an anarchist, I'm not really that worked up about national sovereignty and all that stuff. Like, it's like these people actually think that the national government is there to protect their property. It's like, come on.
Yeah. It's always like kind of a tricky situation, because it's like they're not there to protect your property, but they're there to protect their property, which is you, from a worse enemy, maybe. And like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't know.
Yeah, so there's all these concerns about losing national sovereignty as well as local sovereignty, because when your local government signs up to one of these regional boards, essentially it's agreeing to implement whatever regulations this regional board sets up. So essentially you're losing that local control as well.
Yep. And I mean. that's if there is an excuse to get involved in politics, like the local level does seem to be. It's pretty crazy how much power you can have if you choose to exercise it.
Yeah. And that's actually this Rosa Corey, you know, she's very much an activist in all this stuff, and you know, she's at every local meeting thumping the table and all this stuff. She goes around teaching other people how to do the same, and there have been a lot of like local governments and towns and even states that have essentially passed legislation or resolutions or whatever saying that explicitly kind of say like, look, we're not going to go along with this Agenda 21 stuff. And if even like, I think New Hampshire has actually done some sort of a ban against it. But,
that kind of gets me to a point because, you know, I work in New Hampshire. I work with zoning codes in a lot of towns in New Hampshire. So let me say this, like I understand what she's doing, you know, with Rosa Corey and other people coming out and protesting all this stuff is all fine and well and good, but it's not like this Agenda 21, you know, all this loss of property rights and stuff. This isn't anything new. It's just kind of an addendum to these very oppressive zoning regulations that have existed for almost a century.
That's a good point.
In most places. I mean, that like your control over your property was lost decades ago.
That's a good point.
In most places. The fact that you know, someone comes in and says, well, you already can't build on 50% of your property. And now we found a wetland over here in this corner of your property. So now there's another, you know, 50-foot setback there that you can't build on. I mean, it's just a slight adjustment. You know, it's not like those rights were lost long ago through the zoning process. Which is, there are some towns that don't have zoning in place, but
for anybody that doesn't know, I just want to touch on the wetlands issue here, which is, if you're in land development, is like so brutal.
Yeah.
If there is any trace of moving or even standing water
liquid
on a property,
or you can have vernal pools which don't actually have water most of the time.
Fuck is a vernal? What the fuck is a vernal pool? What is that?
It's like a seasonal wet area that, you know, has like salamanders that live in.
It's basically a puddle.
Yeah,
my ass crack.
They can declare it a wetlands, and then you have. Do you want to just take a stab, Bert, at what permit you have to get, or what department controls the permitting process for that?
The
just
DMV. The DMV.
Nope, even more insane.
The DEP.
Nope.
I don't know which one.
It's the Army Corps of Engineers.
What?
Oh yeah.
Why? That seems like a clerical error.
Permit or an individual permit, and that process, if it's an individual permit, can take years.
That sounds like a clerical error that they that while they were designing this, were like, just get the Army to do it.
Because they declare it, and you can hop in and correct me if I'm wrong here, Tim, but they declare it technically a navigable water. Is that right? Is that their loophole?
Are you fucking
I'm not
nuts?
sure. I don't know the genesis of that, but I know, you know, when you think about like, I was just down in Florida on vacation, and, you know, think about the Everglades down there. Actually, Professor CJ, who you guys had on a couple episodes ago,
shout out.
He has a great episode about the way that the Everglades were developed, and, you know, that was all Army Corps of Engineers kind of stuff. And so I mean, I guess they've taken on, you know,
they do a lot of like dredging and ports. And stuff like
hold on, now what exactly? Just so I can be sure about this, the Army Corps of Engineers is. Someone just make sure I know what this is.
It's the engineering. It's just the engineering part, like
wing of the Army. Yeah.
It's engineers with guns.
Yeah, it's
nice.
You know, they're the guys like in combat. They're the guys like my dad built an Air Force base in.
And
so they go in and they basically take a piece of property, defend it, and build something.
Sure. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, they also do a lot of domestic stuff.
They have like combat engineers that go out and they'll like blow up bridges, and they work with explosives and stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much what I figured.
You know, the peaceful units that aren't deployed are sometimes dredging ports and dredging the intercoastal waterway, and I don't know, all this shit.
Right. They do a lot of work with like the levees in New Orleans and all kinds of
national heroes, gentlemen. National heroes.
Like that.
Show them some respect. They are national American heroes. They are American national American heroes.
And
Yeah, ANAAANA H.
But I mean, so I mean, I was recently on a project where there was a intermittent stream, and we had to go through and get a permit from the Army Corps of Engineers, and it delayed the thing like 6 months, 7 months.
Did you have to go into a recruiting office?
Yeah. No.
Hey guys,
I'm just here for the weapons.
You can get a lot of pussy in Iraq.
Okay, what's next?
Yeah, what is?
All right. So, do you want to try to get back on track here?
Yeah, Joe. Why don't you lump 4, 5, and 6? See if you can lump those. All
Yeah.
together.
Well, so we've actually just kind of covered 7 and 8. So I think we're good on that.
You're still good.
So we'll step back into. So that was our sort of national concerns. If we go back to 4, 5, and 6 is our local concerns. So this is essentially like what's the actual plan to develop the specific plan to develop cities. Like how do we actually want to do it? And the big thing here is what they call smart growth, which is essentially.
Sorry, I'm a child. I'm sorry. That's not funny.
So it's essentially this idea. It's sort of a bastardization of. Do you guys know who Jane Jacobs is?
No.
So she wrote this book called The Death and Life of Great American Cities back in the 60s. And essentially it's a really good it's an excellent book where she's it's almost like a Hayekian view of how cities work and sort of really looking at it kind of from the street level to see like, okay, you know, why is this neighborhood here? Why is this neighborhood so lively compared to this other neighborhood over there, which is just kind of dead and nobody wants to go there? And she kind of cracked the code as to how cities work and you know what elements you need to have to get like a vibrant neighborhood. And essentially the idea of smart growth is to sort of take the conclusions that she came up with, as well as some other kind of, you know, developments like incorporating transit and stuff like that, and sort of apply it everywhere. So essentially, you know, it's basically like take like Greenwich Village in the 60s and then make every town in America look like that, sort of thing.
Okay.
But the idea is basically it's like you know, you've got like in the center of the street you've got like a street tram, you know, like public transit sort of system, and then you've got car lanes, and you might have like 1 or 2 car lanes, and then beside that you might have like some on-street parking. And then you might have a median strip to protect your bike lane, because you got a bike lane on either side. And then you've got your sidewalk for pedestrians. And so the idea is that you get all these different modes of transport incorporated into this, you know, into this one street. And then of course on the either side of the street you've got your mixed use developments where you've got, you know, commercial or retail or something on the first floor, and then residential on the floors above that. And that could be, you know, could be high rise, or it could be, you know, like a low rise, you know, 3-story, 4-story walk up, that sort of thing.
It's funny. You are just describing New York right now. So
yeah. Well, that's I mean, that's
funny.
the thing is that essentially it's like, well, look, this works in New York. Why can't it work everywhere else?
Yeah,
because it does. Because frankly, it doesn't work in New York.
The entire premise was built on a flimsy foundation.
Everybody thinks New York works so well. Everybody thinks New York works so well. We are one subway shutdown from absolute chaos.
Exactly. I mean, that's where a lot of the concern with this stuff comes from. Is that, you know, it creates this dependency on this government infrastructure.
On centralized infrastructure. Absolutely. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
One of the things that Jane Jacobs was really railing against was her observations came out of an observation of the urban development efforts of the 1950s and 1960s, where they were just leveling, you know, neighborhoods and you know, just putting a elevated expressway across the town, or putting in these hideous kind of big, you know, concrete buildings and things like we've talked about, like Government Center in Boston.
Yeah, brutalist architecture. Another thing we hit on.
Yeah, we hit on that on our last episode too. Right, exactly. That's another creepy thing, that brutalism stuff. I wanted to get you guys to talk about architectural, like, aesthetic philosophy. Man, we got to do this again. I didn't think we were going to talk about conspiracies.
Come on. We've got priorities.
So anyways, so
we're trying to save the world.
Jane Jacobs was seeing all this centrally planned urban development, and say, no, this is all wrong. The way that this stuff has to happen naturally, has to happen organically, kind of from the bottom up. And so what you have now with this Joe called kind of smart growth stuff, and it's not, I mean, it's really just like modern urban design. Like this is just kind of the way planners look at the world. And there are a lot of good things about that, but anyways, that's kind of where we're at. But they're looking at it as, well, now that we understand it, this is something that can now be centrally planned.
Yes.
Now that we understand it properly.
Sure.
Which,
back to the technocratic shit.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, I think that it's gotten away again from the Jane Jacobs idea, which is much more, I would say, market-based, much more really libertarian. I mean, Murray Rothbard spoke pretty favorably about Jane Jacobs, and Jane Jacobs is kind of she's kind of everything to everyone, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If you're someone on the left, she did a lot of like local kind of political activism stuff that a lot of people liked. For us libertarians, we look at it, as Joe said, the kind of the Hayekian concepts that she put out there with regards to cities. And I mean, I don't know. It's actually, I think looking at her work and kind of promoting some of her ideas is a good way to make common ground with a lot of people who are interested in some of these issues.
Yeah. Anyway. Jane Jacobs, Glenn Jacobs' grandmother.
Yeah, didn't know? She's coming on the podcast next week.
Yeah.
That's all right, yeah.
We're going to get her and AOC on the same episode.
She could throw a mean left hook, too.
Yeah. Few talk about this.
Yeah. Not many
7 feet Jane Jacobs, 7 feet tall.
7 feet tall.
Murray Rothbard spoke favorably of her because he was under duress.
7 foot tall, 600-pound Antarctic Nazi who wants to bring you freedom.
Tram car.
Hulkish Nazis for liberty. Jesus, that's great. Great.
All right, what's what do we got next?
All right, so here's the thing.
Now that we utterly just made a mockery of that serious point.
I think we do that after every good point they make. We go, we're going to scrub that one.
Just shoot it down.
That's good. Yeah, let's finish this guy up. Let's cap this off. I'm freaked out. I'm genuinely looking at pictures of Greenwich Village right now, freaking out.
Well, so what they're getting at there is that there's this broader idea that that the world is urbanizing, more people are moving into cities. We need to design cities well, and again, there's some legitimacy there. There are people out there who are. There's a big, like, if you think libertarian is kind of contentious, you get into debates between like urbanists and suburbanists.
Oh yeah.
There are people out there who kind of promote really both of these sides, and that's kind of what this Agenda 21 fear is getting at, is that this fear of urbanism, where they're trying to focus a lot of people into these urban centers where they can be more easily controlled. They become dependent on government infrastructure, on government transit, ultimately on all these other kind of government systems, and then that there's going to be less support for outlying areas. And our stance is that we'll just take away the support for the urban stuff and take away the roads and the utilities and all this stuff, state-sponsored stuff out in the suburbs. Take that all away and let the chips fall where they may.
Sure.
Because there's been a lot of subsidization in the past of suburbia as well. But anyways, that's really what this fear of kind of urbanization and urban design is related to Agenda 21 here. So you want to go on the next one, Joe?
Yeah. So I think, and going along with that, I mean, just to sort of expand on the point Tim was just making, is that what people say is that this plan, there's the idea of this what's this called, the Wilderness Project, or I think now it's called the Wilderness Network. Have you heard of this?
Yeah. Are you talking about like I remember that from Development in Denver, where they were like, there was some saying they always had about like returning things. What was it? Is that what you're talking about? Like basically, especially for stormwater, like making sure that it's. You go with yours. Go with yours.
Possibly. Well, this is. I mean, again, I haven't. So there was this UN report. This is prior to the Agenda 21 thing, which is like the UN Biodiversity Report, which is like a 1,300-page document or something like that. And God knows what's in it, but apparently what's come out of that is the idea of this wilderness project, where they want to have essentially areas of the U.S. that are off limits to humans, that are basically just allowed. They call it rewilding. So they'll trying to allow things to go back to, you know, some sort of mythical, you know, natural state, you know, outside of any human interference. And so they want to have these corridors going like all over America to allow migrations for wild animals and that sort of thing.
Yep.
There's like people who are like reintroducing big carnivores back onto land, like you know, cougars and you know, mountain lions and stuff like that, you know, and wolves, which of course pisses off a lot of farmers because these things are attacking all their cattle and stuff.
Yeah.
And so yeah, but essentially where you can take the idea of this wilderness land is that it's creating all these no-go zones for humans. So essentially it's like, well, you can't live there, you know, so we're going to force people to move into cities.
Right.
So, you know, to make room for all this wilderness. And you know, some people have said, "Oh, look, what they're trying to do is create like the Hunger Games, where you've got these, you know, your different cities, which are all separated from each other, and you know, and then nothing else, you know, like it's uninhabitable in between those." Which I think is a little bit of a stretch. There's this map you can get if you Google Wildlands Project map. There's this map that I can't remember. I think Tim knows a bit more about how it came about.
I think this map was actually done by somebody who was protesting this project.
Yeah.
He actually kind of looked at what they were saying and then tried to map it out and basically showed like, you know, it's like the red zones are no-go zones, and there's orange, which is like the kind of land use is really tightly controlled, and then there's like green zones, which is where people can actually live.
Wait, what can I search for this exactly? What can I search so I can see what you're talking about?
Search Wildlands Project map. You'll probably find
as required by the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, Wildlands Project, UN and US Man and Biosphere programs, and the World Heritage Program as a vital step in attaining sustainable development.
Yep.
Wait, does your map say required or mandated?
As required by the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, etc.
Oh, that's so weird, because my map says mandated, and what's funny is in IR, those are two different things. They mean two different words.
You got to take it with a grain of salt, because I think, as Tim said, I'm pretty sure that map was created by someone who's like protesting all this. So he's basically kind of trying to show like, look, this is how bad it could be.
Okay.
The actual website for like the official thing for this is wildlandsnetwork.org.
Okay.
And they do have other maps in there where they show like these migration corridors and stuff like that for specific regions.
We should get them on, Bird. Just dunk on it.
The UN?
Yeah, the UN. Let's go straight to the top.
All right, good.
Yeah. So so the idea is that they're going to be, you know, pushing people out of these areas, cramming everyone into cities in these, you know, pack 'em and stack 'em mixed use developments, where everything is provided by the government under this technocratic world government.
Because we all need wild places to thrive.
Yes,
that's it.
We all got to get wild sometimes.
PM.
Yeah,
we all got to get.
We all need wild
weird
places to allow other things to thrive.
Yeah,
yeah. Like I like ducks, but don't fucking rezone my land for a duck. What the fuck?
Yeah.
What?
Do that.
Dude, you need to show up at some of these meetings and crank out some shit like that, because that was insane what you just said. I don't even know what it meant.
Car, if there's an endangered duck on my property, they're gonna fucking rezone it. That's not a lie. That's just because it's a duck doesn't mean it's not a threat.
And you call yourself a bird.
Yeah, I don't think birds are ducks. Aren't they like classified as something else?
Yeah, they're a relative of the platypus.
Yeah, right. They're like half duck. I mean,
the ducks are the
bird.
weird ones.
Yeah.
The platypus is the original.
I'm gonna
talk about cryptid.
I'm gonna go
Every animal in Australia is a cryptid.
I do have some Australian cryptids that I was going to bring you guys, but that might have to wait till the next time.
Yeah, no, look.
Yeah, but
because at this point,
we need that to take up a whole volume of space.
We do, because if you're going to throw I'm going to have an aneurysm if you throw another conspiracy on top of this one.
Yeah, no. We won't go there today.
What's our last? So, do we have one more point?
Right, I think we're almost done. So there's one which honestly I don't give a shit about open borders. They're worried about
whatever.
Okay, fine. Yeah, that'll come with this, obviously.
Yeah. Shut them down. Wall.
Wall.
And then of course the
wall was going to be mad at you on one side of it.
An animal wall. An animal wall.
The wall. Well, actually, people can't go to where the animals are.
With part of this whole Wildlands project thing, there's the idea that they'll have these animal overpasses over freeways and stuff.
Oh my god!
No, that's real. That exists.
What do you mean animal overpass? What are they gonna fucking read the sign and go? Yeah, this is for me. What the?
No, it's basically just a bridge with grass on top of it.
Yeah. What the fuck does that mean? What does that mean? What does that mean? So okay, where do they wait?
Bert, are you on the wildlandsnetwork.org website, our new homepage?
Shit, I've got to get on it right now.
If you scroll down, there's a green bridge on there.
Seriously?
Yeah, it's right on there, yeah. But the thing is, if you have a look at that thing, and this is something I heard some other podcasts saying, these guys, I think it was Defending Utah podcast, and these guys had a pretty good take on a lot of this stuff. It was actually like a pretty good, reasonably libertarian kind of podcast. But these guys they came at this stuff from really the angle of how's this affecting kind of the local farmers and stuff.
Okay.
And so, but what they said about these things was that they basically look like that thing, it's an animal overpass, but what it really is a checkpoint. So they're essentially saying once that thing's built, then all you got to do is put a little gate inside it with a guy with a gun standing there, and you can control, who gets through and who doesn't.
I want to call this fucking bridge so dumb, but it actually looks kind of cool.
It looks rad as hell.
I can't lie. Yeah. I was gonna say it was fucking dumb, but I guess number one, if it stops, people hitting deer, I mean, we should.
But it won't.
It won't, right? Because deer are the exact type of animal.
Just a slaughter of dead deer right next to the line.
Right. That's the thing. Deer. The only functional purpose of this is to make it so that human beings don't die because they hit deer, but. Deer are so fucking dumb, they won't use these.
Well, they won't use it, and if they did, let me tell you what's going to happen in Wyoming and western Colorado is people are going to be rolling through with guns on the back of their pickups and just taking them out.
Oh,
and that's how they're going to hunt. I guarantee that is what would happen in western
Colorado. You know what, Car? I'm down. I'm down for this.
Yeah, they would just sit there and just shoot deer.
I'm in. Now I'm in, because that sounds amazing.
Which frankly is fine.
It sounds it sounds American as fuck.
Hell yeah.
Machine gunning deer.
Put a bar next to it, man.
I know, right? Yeah, dude.
Bar and deer checkpoint.
This is how capitalism wins once again. Put a goddamn tavern.
We put our bar up next
to it. Son of a bitch. Fuck, that is a dumb idea. That's dumb.
Yeah, it's bad.
That's
but I guess the next point would be the only way that we could keep deer to use this rather than crossing the road would be to fence in the entire highway, and that would go to your point of the checkpoint.
Just
where
fucking let the deer die. Just let the stupid deer get hit by cars. I mean, wouldn't it be better to just spike off the front of your car than to breathe and then to make the deer stay in? Make the deer fear. That's what I say. Make them fear us.
This is how we achieve our Mad Max world that we all desire.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Spike up the front of your car and make those fucking deers remember us. That's at this point, that's the solution.
I wonder, by the very nature of a lot of these green bridges, if they wanted to make a checkpoint, that's really tough to defend if people wanted to get through.
You know what is going to be on every single one of those checkpoints? A speed
Reinforcements
camera.
Are a long way away.
A speed camera is going to be on every single one of those things. Every single one, there's going to be a speed camera underneath so that whenever you go under, it knows exactly who you are, where you are, and how fast you're going. That's all
plus your car's going to have its, your smart sensor in it. Tracking where you're going, anyways.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You're right. At this point, it doesn't make a difference. Right.
Your shoes will have the smart
sensor that can shut
it.
off the ignition if they want to, right?
Yeah.
But the deer will be just fucking fine, right? They'll be okay.
Yeah, well, they're smart deer, so that's how they're going to get them to use the bridge.
Have you ever seen any animal really when you're driving down these highways? Roadkill is not that common. I mean, there's a trillion different kinds of animals. everywhere. You see a dead raccoon every once in a while. What the fuck are they building these bridges for? It's not for protecting the animals. They don't give a fuck.
I don't know. We had this past fall up in Maine here. We had something that came to be known as squirrel apocalypse.
Ooh, I like it. I'm already in.
You know about this bird?
No, but I'm already in. I already like.
Yeah, I'm way in.
So apparently, like last year, there was like a bumper crop of acorns up around here or something.
Okay.
And so all these squirrels had all these little baby squirrels, and then by this past fall, all these little squirrels were growing up, and they were all, but now there weren't quite as many acorns as there had been the year before. So these squirrels were just going crazy.
Oh my God.
And you would see, I mean, it was like the Walking Dead of squirrels, like driving down the road, some of these roads around here. It's like every 20 feet, there's just a squirrel carcass.
Oh my God.
And they're just zipping in front of your car left or right. I mean, squirrel, you see that all the time up here, but this was like otherworld. The most popular Halloween costume up here this year was like a dead, roadkill squirrel.
That's hilarious.
I love Maine's sense of humor.
Yeah, I dig it.
That's all we got.
It's so coastal. It's so cynical and coastal, just like the rest of us.
Yeah. See, guys, this is why we need population control.
Right.
I mean, it's right there.
Yeah. Once that shit starts happening,
the squirrels are teaching us something.
Once that shit starts happening with humans, we are screwed. Once humans are just dying on the sides of the streets. Jesus. Oh, fuck. All right.
Just running across the street looking for food.
Oh, shit, it's Dave. He's gone. Oh, God.
Dress up as him for Halloween. Just
to remember him. Your memento mori to Dave is fucking you dress up as his corpse for Halloween. Oh, Christ.
Shit.
Got it. So basically,
a bad year for Dave's.
We're gonna cuck ourselves as a species to deer because I guess deer need to be protected. That's what I found out.
Wild world we live in, my friend.
Oh yeah. Oh yes.
Yeah.
So what do we have any more? Or?
We've the only other one I think that we've missed is international wealth redistribution. So this whole thing
good. Great.
Is it's just another excuse to basically, it's like the climate change thing where they say, oh look, all these poor countries are suffering more from climate change, so the rich countries have to send them a bunch of money. There's a whole other angle to this which I came up with, which is
I like this.
Have you guys read the Confessions of an Economic Hitman?
Yeah, a long time ago, but that's wild.
Yeah, it's and if you read the Agenda 21, literally the first chapter of it is all about we need to develop resources in the developing world, in the third world, and
give them some loans.
If you've read Confession of an Economic Hitman, it's pretty much that thing to a T. I mean, again, it's the neoliberal thing. It's it's basically we're going to use the World Bank to finance these things. Yeah. And then it's just a money funnel into all of the connected, contractors, miners, consultants, whoever's doing this stuff. And actually there's a way you can look at this where essentially like all the rest of this Agenda 21 stuff is just like a sort of shell cover in order to enable this, in order to just funnel money into all these the same kind of, guys that are involved in that economic hitman stuff.
Yeah.
And that happens not only in the third world with developing the resources and stuff there, but with all these redevelopment projects in the U.S. In the local level, it's like the same formula. It's basically you have some consultants come in and spin up all these great statistics about how much tax revenue this new project is going to generate and all this stuff, and then so the local council takes on all this debt or gets financing from some grants or whatever, and all the money gets funneled to these developers and contractors and consultants and everything.
Well, and then ultimately the local population can't actually support it. Right. They can't, they get the initial project, but they can't maintain it. If it's an electrical, a power station or something, they can't actually afford the electricity. So then they have all this debt, they can't fund it. And then they go back to the World Bank and back to the US or whoever else saying, we need more money. They get in debt, and then, the US says, well, someday I'm going to ask you to do something for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right.
Someday I'm going to ask you for a favor.
Yeah,
it's that kind of thing where ultimately the U.S. or UN or whoever is able to get their fingers into these other countries and to get them to go along with whatever their agenda is.
Yeah. Yep. And if you say anything contrary, you sound like a freaking maniac a lot of the time. And, we shouldn't be redesigning our city for green or building bike lanes and all that crap. I mean, do what you want, like if you've got the money, but I mean, if you are, people look at you like you have three heads a lot of the time. If you're like, whoa, like, why are we doing all this? Is a huge project. We had one here in Fort Worth. It's like already a complete debacle. And surprise, Army Corps of Engineers involved, that was redoing the riverfront. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's just been, it's like any time a big public organization gets involved in all of that planning for that stuff, you're like, well, when is this going sour? Like, it's just a matter of when. Sure. I didn't think it was going to be so soon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I'm creeped out. Out. A little creeped.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is with this stuff is that, it's all just a big slippery slope.
Yeah.
So each of these things sort of taken on their own, it's like, well, okay, yeah, that might work here. That there's, you apply it in a certain locality. Okay, maybe this town could use a complete street where they've got nice bike lanes and stuff. And if there's an organization called ICLEI, ICLEI, which
That's
is
Australian. Is that Australian organization?
No, it's an international council of local environmental something. But
they don't even know what it is. That's how they say it every time. Like international.
ICLEI. I was thinking, you could invent a new cryptid called ICLEI that goes around destroying cities.
ICLEI.
but what it is, it's essentially like a UN NGO that local governments sign up to, and this is essentially when you sign up to ICLEI, it's effectively saying, okay, we agree to do all the Agenda 21 stuff. Mm-hmm. And so and there's, if you go on the ICLEI website, you can see like pull up a map to see like which local councils have signed on to it. And so the city of Adelaide here in Australia has signed on to it, as well as my local suburb. And it's funny too, because like now that I understand what all this stuff is, I see it all over the place. Like around here, there's like, this one what they call a bike boulevard, where essentially they block off roads to cars, but they allow bikes through. So it creates this sort of dedicated bike. They call it bike boulevard. There's another one in the city here where they tried to build one of these like complete streets where they had like, they took out some car lanes, put in bike lanes with like median strips between the bikes and the cars. And I think it lasted like 6 months and they started pulling it out again because like everyone hated it. And so, but having this broader view of this stuff, you kind of see where it all comes from, that it's all kind of driven by this same kind of agenda.
Yeah. And again, my takeaway on this is to kind of react to what you just said, like the ICLEI thing, right? This is one thing that like Rosa Corey and these other people are like, oh, look at ICLEI and see if your town has signed up to Agenda 21. But the reality is that it's not so much this top-down thing. It's really just become part of the zeitgeist. I think, where this is something that people are kind of demanding and expecting now, and that everybody just kind of thinks is the right thing to do, whether or not that originally came from Agenda 21 or not.
It'll be funny if you start supporting, if you start actively like going against these smart cities, and people start, once they become more common, you get told to move to Somalia too.
Right.
There's more reasons for people to tell us to move to Somalia.
Yeah, they don't have cities there, do they?
Yeah, right.
So at the bottom, I guess the bottom line for me is that what I see as the big problem here is that there's this shift of values where obviously people like us value individual rights, individual property rights, the ability to do kind of with your own property what you like, as long as you're not causing a problem on somebody else's property. But there's what this has. This didn't start with Agenda 21, but it has certainly contributed to it. Is that, well, no, it's not. It's not the individual that matters. It's not the individual property that matters. That there's this the greater good. That there's this
the greater good.
in the early 20th century was that there's this collectivist kind of thing where it's for the benefit of everybody, of all these people. But now it's gone beyond that. It's not just about we need to do things that benefit other people equally or whatever. Now we need to do things that benefit other people and also everything else on Earth that isn't people.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, the way that we would like approach this as whatever, market anarchists, ANCAPs, whatever, is to say, okay, well then allow ownership of all this stuff, so that you can actually have prices on stuff, and then you've got these price mechanisms that do this for you. Interest rates alone and futures markets and all this stuff allow you to put prices on this stuff, so you actually know what the value of this stuff is. I mean, this is the whole problem. It's the socialist calculation problem writ large. Yep. Because you've got all this stuff that's just unowned and
it's just somebody shooting from the hip saying
non-valued.
I think this is going to be good, and then you go through all this infrastructure build out, and people are like, actually, it's kind of shit. And then and you're like, well, okay. I mean, that could have been taken care of with a market.
Yeah.
Well, and I would go. I don't think we even need to go that far to say that it all has to be kind of priced out and everything. I mean, we've talked about on some other episodes this concept of public space, and it gets into the idea of if the roads were to become privatized, who would own the roads and how would you manage that and everything. And so we've talked about ideas of various kinds of, let's say, cooperatives or trusts and different kinds of non-governmental organizations that can have some kind of broad-based public type of inclusion, and can manage certain pieces of property, manage resource, even I mean, obviously, there's plenty of developments that have homeowners associations and things like that, which I'm not all that keen on, and that's been kind of a theme of a lot of libertarian stuff, is that we can get together in this one place and have a homeowners association, and that's how we're going to manage ourselves. But as I mentioned in one of our earlier episodes, I don't see that as the way that Libertopia is going to be managed. But probably. We can think about ways for people to organize and to come to certain agreements and consensus about the way that certain things will be managed, that certain rights will be established, without necessarily saying we just have to divvy everything up to people as individual property, let's say. Yeah. So in other words, we can have kind of a softer landing for the libertarian ideal than just sell it all off, and to the highest bidder.
Right.
Yeah.
In agreement. Yeah. Boom. Conspiracy Court and Architecture podcast all in one. How do you fucking like that?
Look at what we all just accomplished.
We are goddamn it, Car. We are so versatile. It is
wild.
The people need to thank us.
Multi-sport
the term is unstructured.
Ooh, that's a good way to end this one. Ooh, that's a great name for this podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Unstructured episode. I like it.
So what do you guys have coming up? Obviously, I know that you spoke at and appeared at you spoke not at PorcFest. I can't remember which one it was, but I know you guys
have spoken at PorcFest. But yeah, most recently, our last episode was called the Free Coast Festival, which is a kind of a local event in the Seacoast area of New Hampshire.
Okay,
we are. I don't know. We want to try to. I guess pick up the pace with some of our episodes.
What has it been since October?
Yeah. So we'll probably release this episode, and the beautiful thing is that this will actually be episode 21 for us.
Nice. Nice.
All right. I dig it.
Yeah. So we'll put this out as one of our episodes as well.
Nice. Nice.
But then after, so Tim's been on a contract for the last 6 months, so it's been tough for us to schedule stuff.
Yeah.
I think that's done now.
When I moved to frickin' Australia.
Yeah. So we've got a few sort of irons on the stove, but we gotta get back into it. Really, we haven't done any, like, literally the only podcasts we've done recently have been like, Tim's gone and given a speech somewhere, and then we've done like a one session just to kind of do a breakdown of the speech and then put that out. So it's like, if Tim's not giving speeches, like, we're not doing podcasts.
well, you guys got on Tom Woods. How do you get on Tom Woods? How do we get on Tom Woods? Tell us.
We don't. I don't know why you're asking.
Hold on. I heard you guys. I heard Tom do a promo for you guys.
Well, because we bought his stuff.
Well, that's kind of what we did, but as I recall, he kind of like, well, if you're into that sort of thing, But yeah, we had set up our website through his link, and Joe, I know you kind of got that all up and running. And then you
well, no, because what happened was that we did the original thing where you emailed him and stuff, and he actually like spaced it on us, like he didn't do a promo. So then I think it was like a year later, we had released a bunch of episodes, and then I wrote back to him and say, "Hey Tom, by the way, you never did our promo." Oh shit, I'm so sorry. Da-da-da. And so kind of going on from that conversation, because I said, "Oh hey, by the way, we would be interested in doing an episode with you."
We guilted him into having what's on the podcast.
All right, guilt, Bird,
right.
You hear that? Guilt is the way.
Yeah, I mean the guy does. He's done what? 1,500 episodes or something like that. Like he's hungry for content.
That's true.
So if you can pitch him a decent idea, I think he'll.
Well, that's the thing. We are hungry,
but
we're kind of trying to fill a niche here with talking about the built environment, the kind of things we've been talking about today, and so we're trying to kind of carve out that space. So I don't know. I guess we could come to him with some kind of topical stuff, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I think I was listening to y'all.
Call him a nerd. Call him a nerd.
You went on. What's up?
Call Tom. You need to call Tom a nerd.
Actually, I think we probably still have his Skype details.
You can just call him up randomly. But, hey Tom,
call him.
Hey, it wasn't on my calendar.
Call him up. Listen to me. Call him
start
up.
Recording.
Listen to me. And I'm serious here. Listen to me. Call him up. Tell him about Dark Tom Woods. Get him thinking that he might have a shadow doppelganger who knows how to hack our fucking program.
We'll craft it. We'll get on there.
Yeah.
We'll get on there.
Make it happen.
I can guarantee you it'll be the first episode that he has where he'll be speechless.
It's just a platform for us to spew our typical bullshit, and he just wraps it up.
It would be nothing. Yeah, right. It would be nothing else. It would be 15 minutes. He would go, "All right, that was great." We'll go, "Wait, we're not done." He hangs up. That's what's next. #fags for Woods. I'm sure he'll be delighted to see that in his mentions.
Yeah, that's good. Tag him in everything.
Everything. I swear to God.
From now on has to tag Tom Woods if you've got the space for it. It doesn't matter what the tweet's about. It
doesn't matter. No,
tag him.
You know what? And I'm both serious here. It would be really funny if our viewers did that. It would also be really awful if our viewers did that. So guys, go and do whatever the hell you want.
I give you 3 tweets before everyone gets blocked.
Absolutely blocked. Right. That's including us. Although, fucking Carr, you got blocked by Stefan. Still nothing. Nothing on my end.
Yeah, it's weird.
It's weird. Really odd. All right, guys.
I didn't even get blocked over anything in particular.
He just doesn't like you.
Tweeted him.
He doesn't like you, and I'm about to block you too. Yeah. What do we got here? Let's finish up. Plug it. Yeah. Get us some plugs.
Yeah, so we're anarchitecturepodcast.com is the website. We're on Twitter at anarchitecturep. The P just because there's some other anarchitecture out there that already had that one, so the P is for podcast.
Oh, okay.
Anarchitecture 21.
We're on.
My mind was going wild, wondering what the P could have meant.
Yeah. We're on all the podcatchers. If you search anarchitecture, we should pop up. I don't know. Anything else? Instagram. We're on. I think Instagram's also an architecture P, but we don't do a lot on there. Most of the stuff we.
Are you gentlemen going down to Childerberg, or?
Yeah, you guys coming down to Childerberg?
Yeah, you guys going to Childerberg?
Oof, I don't know. I gotta. When is it?
First weekend in June.
June. Oof, I don't know. I'm doing some traveling this summer.
You'll be down there. That's good.
you gotta bring it. Maybe we'll put that on the agenda. Yeah.
Guys, say it for the just say it for the fans that you'll be there.
yeah. Help us hype this thing up, right. So it's not just me and Jake.
It's gonna be you and Jake.
How about I phone in? I'll do like one of those video speeches.
That sounds good.
We'll set up an iPad, dude. Yes, we have to do that.
That's what I do to every single Liberty thing that Tim goes to. Like last time, like I call him up on Skype or whatever, and he's walking around the conference introducing me to people. Like
that's awesome.
Yeah. The best one was, so we're just at Liberty Forum. Actually, I got to meet your friend Pete.
Shout out to Pete Raymond.
Yeah. Talk and everything. Yeah. And so Joe calls at one point, and we're just standing in, getting drinks as a little cocktail hour thing or whatever. And I'm talking to Joe. Guy comes over next to me, grabs the phone. It's Vermin Supreme.
Oh my god!
With the boot on his head, and starts talking to Joe. He's like,
"Hey,
who's this?" Like, he's in Australia. He's like, "Australia? They got ponies over
there." That's amazing. You were at the Liberty Forum. Was that the one down at Lake Jackson?
No, New Hampshire Liberty Forum.
Oh, okay. I remember when.
When Pete Raymond spoke there, and they had a.
Yeah. When you said Pete at first, my mind was like racing. I was like, "Who the fuck is Pete?" I just still have not made the switch in my mind.
Well, I called him man with his face, so I don't know if that was a
no.
Or not,
I'm not changing my contact info to Pete from Manson, so his name will never change to me. Anything else? Right. What other plugs you got?
Yeah, so we've also got our band, which we've been playing together since we were like 14.
Nice.
And we're setting up a web page for it now, which we'll try to have that online by the time you release this episode, which is diametricband.com.
Cool. All right.
And
cool.
I don't know quite what that's going to look like yet because they haven't actually done it, but hopefully we'll have it done within a week.
Fuck yeah.
Nice. Are you using Tom Wood's link, and can you toss us the shout out?
We're actually just using the same hosting that we've got because we can get like 5 domains on the same hosting, so it's like no extra money. So yeah,
very cool.
But,
awesome.
Yeah. So we're just doing all this other stuff till the band takes off.
Fuck yeah. Fuck yeah. All right, guys, shit. That was freaking amazing.
That was awesome.
I love when we put out content that is both funny and educational and creepy in this case.
And that's something that we're big on here at the Fatcast is education. Education first is what we say.
Education first. Well, Toad first. Toad forever, frankly. But whatever.
As long as you're sticking to the Rockefeller education protocols.
Of course. Yes, our Prussian design.
Yep. Stay within our design of education and we're good. So I guess with that, until next week, 2 hands on the wheel.
Ooh.
Thanks for listening to An Architecture Podcast, the built environment of a stateless society. Visit anarchitecturepodcast.com to follow our blog and social media and find out how you can support us through Patreon or with cryptocurrency.
That sounds interesting. Having to deal with architects. I feel like those guys are a bunch of dicks.
They're a pain in the ass.
Can't confirm.
I feel like dealing with
just join the call. What are you talking about?
No, nothing. Just cryptids and
friggin' architects.